Begin. Welcome everyone to the Caring webinar series, which aims to highlight the strategic recommendations from the State of the World's Fathers Reports 2023, a series organized and sponsored by MenCare, Equimundo, and Global Boyhood Initiative. Thank you for joining us. My name is Suna Hanos-Penny, Director of Strategy and International Programs for ACEV, the Mother-Child Education Foundation based in Turkey. Involved, engaged fatherhood in early childhood years is a primary area of practice of ours at ACEV, and we have multiple gender transformative parenting programs. I'm going to be chairing the session of this webinar. Today, we'll talk about how to revolutionize the way boys are taught about care. It's a tremendously important topic. This is a conversation about research, resources, and lessons on caring for boys. We're lucky. We have an all-star panel lined up for this topic. Wessel van den Berg from Equimundo, Alina Varghese from the Gender Lab, Mary Gordon from Roots of Empathy, Tui Nguyen from Room to Read, and Tatiana Mura from Observatory on Masculinities at Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra. Let me just say, we'll first hear from the panelists, and then later on at the end, we'll have a question and answer session where audience members will have an opportunity to pose their questions to the panelists. Just two small tech reminders. Please be aware that all microphones on the audience side is automatically muted. And so please put your questions and reflections in the Q&A function that is available. We will be following it throughout the session. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Wessel, I'd like to invite you to start us off. I know you'll be talking about a MenCare position, the series in the State of the World's Fathers context, and you'll tell us about the caring acronym. Just briefly, let me share Wessel's bio with everyone. Dr. Wessel van den Berg works as the MenCare officer at Equimundo. He is also the father of 2 young children and sees fatherhood as his primary job. His curiosity about men and care led him to work as a kindergarten teacher, counselor, activist, and researcher. He's a co-founder of the MenCare Global Fatherhood Campaign and the State of South Africa's Fathers Report series. All right, we'll be listening to you, Wessel.
Thank you so much, Suna. I'm so pleased to see this webinar come to reality, and I have to say, just on a personal note, I'm the father of 2 children, and my son is 7 years old. And as I mentioned to all of you in the preparation session, that I've been so sensitive to this interaction between men in caregiving roles and my son's exposure to that norms in the world that he lives in at the moment. It's been just a wonderful focus for me and him for this week in preparation for today. So I will briefly introduce the MenCare campaign and the Global Boyhood Initiative. There are lots of other materials on the websites and on the various channels available for interested attendees who want to learn more. But I just want to situate this webinar in the broader context of the reason that we are doing this today. So as you can see on the screen, there's 2 campaigns that are responsible or hosting the conversation that we're having today. The first one is the MenCare Global Fatherhood Campaign, and I put a screen grab on our website up there. MenCare was launched and began activities in 2011 already, so we are now going on 12 years. We've got just over 100 partners in 65 countries who are aligned with the campaign and doing work that's associated with men's caregiving. Our vision is for men to find purpose in care, but also to do half of the share of unpaid care work in the world. And MenCare is coordinated by Sonke Gender Justice and Equimundo, where I work, Equimundo Center for Masculinities and Social Justice. The Other campaign that is also informing today's webinar is, of course, GBI, or the Global Boyhood Initiative, also coordinated by Equimundo. And there's a screen grab from the website. GBI is a much newer campaign, and it focuses on the gender socialization of boys particularly. And care is one subcomponent of that. And today we will speak about this intersection between men's caregiving, but also boys' exposure to care norms. And the reason that we are talking about this is that we have just released the current State of the World's Fathers report, produced by Equimundo for the MenCare campaign. I am speaking actually on behalf of my colleague Tavishi Gupta today, who is not able to join us today. It was meant to be Tavishi speaking, but I am standing in for her. She is the lead researcher on the report, and the report contains a set of data that was collected from 17 countries around the world, from a sample of 12,000 respondents on a very detailed survey. It was mostly a half and half gender split. There were also some correspondents or respondents who identified as non-binary, but most of the respondents were parents. And from that data, we drew quite a few lessons about particularly men's positioning in caregiving in the world. And headline number 6 is the headline in the report that I would encourage people who are interested to go and have a look at. It speaks to the fact that the state of boyhood is changing, and that most of the parents that we surveyed actually believed that sons as well as daughters should be taught to do care work. So when we speak about care, there are, of course, multiple dimensions to care. One dimension is caregiving, as Joan Tronto calls it, or the work involved in doing care. Cooking, cleaning, sewing, taking care of siblings, etc. But then there's also, of course, the more affective feeling side of care, caring about somebody, having empathy. And in today's webinar, we'll hear about both of those dimensions, both the gender equality involved in doing caring tasks, but also that emotional dimension of cultivating empathy, particularly from Mary's contribution about the roots of empathy. So the survey finding that I drew out for this slide shows that a majority of men and women who responded, more than 80%, disagreed that boys should not do the care work. In other words, agreed that boys should also do the care work. And then other questions throughout the survey also highlighted the fact that parents were very aware of the point that boys are socialized to believe they should be in charge of a household and that they should not show their feelings. So we are, of course, talking about ways to counter that today. The webinar series is matches the set of recommendations from the State of the World's Fathers report. And we arranged the recommendations in the report according to the acronym CARING, C-A-R-I-N-G. And for those of you who have been following the series, you would know that we have completed the first 2 webinars, and the next one coming up in September is the one on I. But today we are focusing on the R in caring, which is revolutionizing the way boys are taught about care. Just before I hand back to you, Suna, I want to just highlight the particular recommendations that are contained under that R. And the first one is to start young. And we've heard this not only from this State of the World's Fathers report, but in multiple studies and from multiple contexts, that gender norms are formed early. So to start young, particularly to promote emotional connection and expression, this among boys particularly. The second one is to not only try and avoid the effect of screen time on children, but to harness the power of digital tools with age-appropriate educational materials. And I really look forward to the contribution from Tatiana from SESH, from the University of Coimbra on the material that you are developing. And then the last recommendation that I'll highlight here is really to try and, in the life space of children, to work with manufacturers and producers of toys, games, clothing, as well as mass media productions, to ensure that at least they do not reinforce stereotypes, but at best, hopefully, they actively promote gender equality. So that's the context for the webinar, and I'll hand back to you to take us through the rest of the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Wessel. That is a great introduction and foundation for our conversation. I'm also glad you highlighted the relevant recommendations from the State of the World's Fathers Report 2023. That was very helpful. So next, we have a presentation from Alina. Oh, I forgot to mention, everyone, since this is a global campaign and we're all situated in different parts of the world, this truly is a very global webinar. I'm representing a Turkish organization, but I'm based in Toronto at the moment. Wessel is joining us from Cape Town, South Africa, and now our next speaker, Alina, will be joining us from Mumbai, India. Alina will be talking about a very important initiative, the Gender Lab Boys program. Let me quickly share with you all Alina's bio. Alina Varghese is a feminist with a keen interest in social sciences. Her areas of interest are at the intersection of gender, education, sexuality, and understanding experiences around masculinities. She has completed her master's in gender studies from Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Social Sciences and bachelor degrees in social sciences from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She's currently working with the Gender Lab as a co-lead, redefining masculinities, and is based out of Mumbai. But Alina has engaged in projects with the World Bank towards building safer cities and building the capacity of different organizations throughout training and curriculum building. She believes that children and youth have the potential to critically challenge as well as rebuild narratives towards an equitable and caring future and dreams of working towards the same. All right, Alina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Suna, for that warm introduction. Hi, everybody. Glad all of you could make it. Just allow me a moment to share my screen as well. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen. Okay, great. First of all, a big cheers to the organizing team for putting together such a comprehensive report and inspiring and influencing this work. I think today's theme, like already Vessel and Suna mentioned, is revolutionizing the ways in which boys are taught about care. And when I was looking at this, I was like, okay, how do we do that? Is such a powerful and interesting question for all of us to pause and think together. So yeah, I'm really curious and excited to listen to the kind of questions and insights that's going to come from the panel and the webinar conversations today. So I would really love to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing as part of our work. And I work with a team called the Gender Lab, like Suna already mentioned, and our work started almost a decade back with the vision of visibilizing the experiences and gendered realities of adolescent girls and women. So we've been working with adolescent girls, 13, 14-year-old girls through schools, and we've been engaging them through workshops and experiential projects and experiential experiences to learn how do we engage with and challenge some of the issues that we feel keenly connected to in our school, in our community, in our neighborhood, etc. And we have a fellowship called Empowering Women, where young women in the age group of 20 to 25 joined with us in turn to mentor these girls through the school. So that has been like kind of the base of our work, that when we started the work. And another vertical that emerged eventually for us when we started doing this work on gender and very deeply on grassroots with women and girls has been a vertical called Redefining Masculinities. We have two programs within the vertical. One is the Gender Lab Boys program, about which I'll take some time to share a little bit more in terms of what our experiences, learning, and challenges as well has been. And the second program that we have as part of this is called How We Raise Our Boys, where we engage with educators and teachers who work with young adolescent boys. So yeah, so the engagement model in the Gender Lab Boys program has been adapted from the girls program as well, where we work with 13, 14-year-old adolescent boys who are school going. And we've been working with both government schools as well as private schools, but largely low income private schools is where we've been working. And we've been working across both rural and urban geographies in different parts of India, but primarily in Mumbai and Haryana and Jeend district in Haryana state in India. So far, we've worked with about 35,000 girls, 6,000 boys from across 200 different schools. And um, before sharing a little bit more about the program itself, I think I want to share or bring attention to the context of the work that we're doing, which is, of course, like when we zoom out and look at the work that has been happening, or the conversations or the narratives that has been happening in gender, there's been different kinds of shifts happening in terms of how acceptance and reception is there for conversations on gender, and to an extent to the socioeconomic status of women and girls in India as well, even though very gradual. But I think feminists in the country as well as globally is still parallelly also tackling a lot of very basic issues, right, including access to education, gender-based violence, systemic oppression of girls, women, trans folks, other genders, regional and communal conflicts, etc. So while these are the realities, and this has been, or it is in this context that we've been asking some questions related to the work on masculinities, which primarily has been grounded on in what ways are boys experiencing these realities, and how are they understanding the changes that they see around them, what have they been seeing or what have they been learning. And this has been something that is pricked our curiosity when we started working or engaging with boys and men. So one of the primary questions are understanding of what do boys think, or what are the questions that they hold. I'd like to, this is again a very primary, like for the sake of an example, that I have some questions that the boys, adolescent boys in the school had asked. So questions like, why do our teachers and parents do not talk to us about sex education? Why is there a difference between girls and boys? Why is it that boys cannot do homework and girls can't work for earning money? Or even questions like, why do, when people feel angry, what do they achieve by using abusive words? Or I think one of the questions that have stayed with me for a long time with a group of boys that I'd worked with has been, we have international day for girls and women, and that's celebrated. Why do we not have international days for men, and why is it not celebrated? Like, why are we not celebrated for what we are? So if 13, 14-year-old boys are asking these kind of questions, and they are holding on to different kind of emotions with respect to what they are observing around them and what they're seeing around them, that's where for us, I think it becomes, or it became like critically important to create spaces where we are able to engage with them. So within the boys program, so the model is we engage with schools where we get roughly about 15 to 20 hours with a batch of boys, and we work with them for a period of 4 to 5 months through 10 to 12 sessions, where we conduct workshops with them. And the intention has been that it's not that boys, or it's not that young men do not hold questions, or that they're completely unaware of what's going on around them, but they do have their own sets of experiences. So how do we create learning spaces for boys which are safe for them, where they feel like they can ask these kind of questions, or they can put across their opinions and perspectives without feeling attacked, or without feeling judged, or without feeling like, oh, am I saying something wrong? But let's work with where I am from. So the intention of the workshops or the learning spaces has been to create a safe space where we can engage in a dialogue with them from where they are and where their starting point is. And the curriculum that we've had over the years, I mean, we did a pilot in 2017, and it has also immensely evolved over a period of time. So right now we do cover a broad range of topics with the boys that we work with, from basics of gender, its distinction from sex, what are gender stereotypes, what are the notions of masculinities that they experience around them, how do they experience and understand and navigate violence, and how they understand labor, or how they see labor, with specific focus on unpaid care work. So one of the learnings for us, especially around care work and labor with the boys, has been that it's important to, like, to get the conversations on care cracking with boys at such a young age, it's important to not look at care in isolation, but also hold these conversations in the larger context of how they experience gender and notions around masculinities, right? So, for example, one of the questions where boys really struggle is ki, okay, fathers, they go out and work. That's what they see largely, right? They go out and work. So is it not a little bit of unfair expectation that they come back home and they do the household, or they engage in the unpaid care work as well? So and it's also interesting to see, but how even when they see that there are mothers or there are women who are going out and work, meaning who are employed, it's almost easy for them to accept that, oh, but they do it out of love, they do it because they want to do it. So I think it's critically important that we look at then what are the different values, what are the different attributes, or what are the different characteristics that are associated with care, and what are the spaces and what are the ways in which boys are ridiculed or shamed or taught that this is not this attribute or this characteristics is not for you, right? So it's in a very deeply patriarchal context. There's a lot of shaming of anything that's associated, mostly associated as feminine. So how do we work around the shame, and how do we normalize these conversations where we're not dealing with shame, but we're dealing with curiosities and encouragement, is something that we try to bring about in our conversations when we engage or hold these conversations with boys. um, I think one of another learning for us has also been around this in terms of, and this is also highlighted in the State of the World's Fathers reports, that boys tend to take up more care work when they see their fathers do it or when they see men, right? And that's really lacking, at least in the context that we work right here. So when we've been designing the programs at the initial phase, we've had high expectations of, okay, look at this media content, but look at this, look around us, how do we challenge these and how do we critique these? But moving from there to bring about, are we expecting the boys to, Suna, yes?
I'm so sorry to kindly note that we're coming close to the end. If you
All
can
right.
wrap it up in the next 1 or 2 minutes, that would be great.
All right, I'll take another couple of minutes. Yeah, so to bring, or are we expecting them to model something that they're not even seeing, right? So to be able to bring in examples, resources, content, children's stories, movies, books that have alternative representations has been something that we've been trying to do. So in terms of role modeling, I think we've also, one of the things that we've been able to do in the model that we have is to bring in young men, or try to bring in young men to work with the children who could be role models, and in turn have a journey of their own in terms of unpacking masculinities. And I just will take you to the last slide here, which is also in relation to the program that I shared about how we raise our boys, where we've been trying to engage with educators as well. And it's really interesting to see when we engage with teachers, especially a group which is largely male teachers, what are some of the aspects that they identify as parts of their own personal and social identities, which makes them feel powerless. And this image that we have here is a brainstorming from a group which was largely male, and a lot of people sharing that they feel powerless because they don't have a government job, they feel powerless because they're a teacher, just a teacher, or a lot of feeling powerless because of their physical characteristics, their caste, their religion, their age, etc. So it's really interesting to see how our experience of power and our experiences of where we feel safe is also interconnected to our notions around masculinities and our gender. So I think in the work that we do, be it with boys or be it with educators or the young men who join in to support this work with boys, I think an attempt is to create, how do we create experiences that are safer for them, from where they can begin from their experiences and enable to question the privileges that they experience. So keeping mind in time, I think I'll close here, and maybe if you have time at the end, we could deep dive more into this. But thanks for listening. Thanks, Suna.
No, thank you, Alina. Exactly like you said, at the end, based on certain questions, you can actually tell us more. It's very, very interesting. One note to the audience, please post questions in the chat, the Q&A function, because we'll be able to answer those and reflect on those later on at the end. So our next speaker is Mary Gordon from Roots of Empathy. This is a very simple program that has a lot of research on it, and Mary's going to be talking about it. And we're hoping that the next generation of men will be responsible men and fathers. So it's key to learn and reflect from a program like this. Mary is joining us from Newfoundland, Canada. Mary is an award-winning social entrepreneur, educator, best-selling author, parenting expert, and child advocate who has created an international children's charity, Roots of Empathy. Ms. Gordon has consulted with and presented to the UN, the WHO, UNICEF, the Nelson Mandela Children's Foundation, and governments. She's a regular keynote speaker at conferences and has several TED Talks. She has been honored with the Governor General of Canada Award for Innovation, is a recipient of the Order of Canada, Order of Ontario, and Order of Newfoundland and Labrador, and is also the recipient of honorary doctorates in Canada and Europe. So, Mary, the floor is yours. We're looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you very much, Suna. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you, Essel, for your kind invitation. And thank you, Alina, for the very exciting presentation. I'll certainly be looking it up to learn more. I'd like to start by sharing a story with you about fatherhood. The Roots of Empathy program works with children in elementary school in their classroom. We bring a baby in with a parent, and the children follow the development of the baby and the relationship between the baby and the parent throughout the first year of the baby's life. So this young boy, Darren, who was almost 2 years older than the other children in his grade 8 class, was a very sad person and a tragedy, really. His mother was murdered in front of his eyes when he was 4 years old. So he lived in a series of foster care situations, and his behavior was understandably aggressive. Children wear their pain in their behavior. So he had many, many homes, none of them a real home. And when he arrived in the Roots of Empathy class in grade 8, he was at least a foot taller than the other children. He had shaved his head except for a ponytail at the back. And he had a tattoo at the back of his head. Now, this was a long time ago. Now it's not so unusual to have tattoos, but for then it was very unusual. And he tried to look menacing. He didn't want anyone to think he was soft. And the mother with the little baby said to the children, the bell is going to go now and you're going to be leaving for lunch. Is there anybody who would like to try on my baby's carrier before you leave? And to everyone's surprise, didn't our hero put up his hand to say he would like to try on the baby carrier? And the children were surprised, but they were making a lot of noise, getting their backpacks on and leaving. And the Roots of Empathy instructor said to Darren, would you like to put the baby in the carrier? And Darren said yes, and the mother looked mildly horrified. But very gently, the baby was given, and Darren put the baby in, and the baby molded to him. And he put his arms around the baby in the carrier and went to the corner and was rocking like a seasick rock sometimes parents do with their babies. And after a few minutes, he came back to give the baby back to the mother. And he said to the Roots of Empathy instructor, do you think that if no one has ever loved you, that you could still be a good father? And at that point, the mother gasped because of the deep, deep question. And the ray of hope the teacher saw brought tears to her eyes. So I think that parenting is not something that's taught. It's something that's caught. And that's what Roots of Empathy is. It's bringing a model of love, the attachment relationship between the baby and the parent, which is where empathy develops. Empathy is something that develops through that early attachment between the parent and the baby. And it's in the earliest years of life that empathy develops. And you cannot teach empathy like you might mathematics. And having worked in my early years, like Wessel, I started with kindergarten because I thought I'd like to work with the youngest children. But then I realized all the violence in their lives. So I worked a lot on domestic violence and child abuse. And what I realized was the common denominator in all that suffering was the absence of empathy. So I thought, okay, how can we fix this? But also I realized from my first innovation, working with parents, particularly teenage mothers and their babies, was that empathy did develop through this early relationship or not. So I decided to make life equitable. We would give children a chance to develop empathy when they went to school, that birth should not be destiny. And if you wanted to break cycles of generational violence and poor parenting, you had to give children a chance to develop empathy. So that's what we did. And as Suna said, there's research from three continents to show that it does do that. It builds empathy and caring. So what I'd like to do, Wessel, is just show the 1-minute video, which gives a beautiful example of Ricardo at the end of it, who is a 13-year-old boy who's been through Roots of Empathy. And yes, there are some experts there, and there's a nod to Indigenous work that we do, but over to you, Wessel.
The work that you do is world-changing. One of the great things about Roots of Empathy is that it's an experience-based program.
And I began to see something extraordinary in a classroom. A group of kids who cared, who were concerned, who loved that baby.
But what I love most of all is that although it's a universal program, it has the biggest impact on the children who need it the most. And I saw this time and time again.
Is that Northern Ireland, as you will know, has a long history of civil conflict. The idea of empathy and the exploration in this program of how empathy is something that we all need, and children in particular are so receptive.
One of the elders on the break came up to me and said, "This is the first time that I've been in a school since residential school. This program is very much the way that we as a community raise and teach our young people."
I start to feel softer, happier, calm, and just joyful. I look around our classroom and everyone is happy. It's like Roots of Empathy just changed us. All our anger and all our stress, it goes away.
As Mary Gordon says, one child at a time. But if we can help that one child, and that one child becomes an ethical and compassionate leader who leads with empathy, what a difference that child can make.
I think I want to live in that world, one where people are kind and empathetic, where their well-being is important. That's the kind of world I want to live in.
Thank you, Wessel. Could you please go to the slides?
Sure, one moment.
So here are some of the dads with what we call their tiny teachers, because in this program, the baby is the teacher. The children are coached to observe the baby as the baby is on a green blanket with the father and the mother, or either one or both. And they're asked to see how they think the baby is feeling. And the children are brilliant at forecasting and giving the report on their concept of how they think that baby is feeling. And then the trick is the Roots of Empathy instructor asks them when they have felt like that. So the children very quickly start sharing with one another their feelings without any concern about being criticized. the next picture, please. And here's how the children interact with the baby on the green blanket. And it's interesting. The baby is able to connect with the children in such an open way, and the boys show their tenderness, and they're not afraid. And in Roots of Empathy, we have many operating principles that allow boys to show their real selves and their empathic selves and their emotional selves. We operate from a position of intrinsic motivation. No praise, no rewards, no name on your board for being brilliant. Simply, you share something when you have something to share, and everybody is respected and appreciated for what they say, but not rewarded. We want the children to be proud of themselves. So here we have the boys in the classroom interacting with the baby in a joyful way. Actually, we have had boys who have had tears when the baby, after a full year, has taken their first steps. They have had tears of shared joy, tears of empathy for the baby. Next, please, Vessel. And here you have the ethic of care. In Roots of Empathy, we ask the parent to try a new food the baby hasn't had, so we can see how the baby responds to novelty. We can see how the parent interacts with the baby. And this was very tidy feeding, actually, not usually the case. And here again, the father showing such joy and pride in the baby. And of course, the children see how the daddy and the mother have different approaches, but both have that dedication to the baby. And the next one, we're nearly through the slides. And this is another father. Every single time the program happens, the parent walks the baby around for each child to touch and to sing to. They're sung in and they're sung out. And the next one, please. And this is just the story of our research. We've been 27 years in the world on 3 continents, and it doesn't matter which of the 7 languages the children are speaking. They speak with empathy when they have the opportunity to understand how the baby feels. And then the theory of change, they understand their own feelings and they're able to read the feelings of their friends. They become emotionally literate, and that is the affective side of empathy as opposed to the cognitive side of empathy. So let me stop there for our next speaker.
Mary, that was excellent. Thank you. That story is going to stick with me for a while. And thank you so much for sharing those pictures. It was very clear to us. Now, our next speaker, let me introduce you to Thuy Nguyen, who will be speaking about Room to Read. Interestingly, I saw this program in action personally many years ago while I was doing work in Laos. Room to Read has resources, and Thuy will be sharing about the project experience. And Thuy is based in Vietnam currently. Very briefly, let me introduce Thuy's background to everyone. Thuy is a regional program manager in Southeast Asia for the girls' education program, Room to Read. She has over 15 years of professional experience in programs focused on women's rights and gender equality in international development. Based in Vietnam, Thuy has also worked in Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, and Palestine. Thuy is overseeing the design and implementation of Room to Read's Life Skills for Equality project for boys, which is currently piloted in Cambodia. The 2-year program engages boys as active stakeholders in promoting a gender equitable world. Thuy, we're listening to you.
Thank you, Suna, for the nice introduction. And I really still in the very emotional and inspiring the story from Mary. This is so excellent stories I have heard. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and it is my pleasure to be here on behalf of Room to Read to share with you some of our initial experience with our very first pilot project on boys engagement, which is currently implemented in Cambodia. And the project names the Life Skill for Equality projects. We normally call it LSEF. Next slide, please. Yeah. Room to Read have many years promoting girl education and gender equality. And we continue our commitment by expanding our gender work to offering programs for boys. And the question is why the boys engagement is so important work for Room to Read, at Room to Read. Next slide, please. Yeah, in 2020, Room to Read conducted a formative research in Kampong Thom province, Cambodia. And the findings reaffirmed that boys are strongly influenced by social pressures and traditional gender norms with a very limited support mechanism and mentorship. Boys feel overwhelmed with the double burden of housework and schoolwork and suffering from stress and mental health issues. And in some cases are experiencing the violence at home. And they struggle to disclose their emotion and difficulties, and they found a lot of difficult to break on the social norms, which pressure them to conform with the traditional gender norms. With this in mind, Room to Read have worked with Equimundo to canvas, design, field test boys engagement pilot programs, which is currently implemented in Bantam Minchai province of Cambodia from 21 to 24. Yeah, and our approach to boy engagement is to promote boys' critical reflections on gender norms and stereotypes, including masculinity. And it's really important for us to help them to develop skills and determination to graduate, develop a strong network of peers, and development equal and respectful relationships. And I totally agree with Mary that empathy is a very critical skill that adolescents should be built on, including the boys. Yeah. So what is the LSEP's project looks like? It is a 2-year life skill education for boys, which offer to 2 cohorts of 800 boys, grade 7 and 8 at 4 schools in Bantam Minchai province in Cambodia. And within 2 years, boys receive a total of 34 life skill sections. Each session lasts for about 45 minutes. And these 34 sections are structured around six thematic topics. Next slide, please. Yeah, including, I think that, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so we based on our formative research, we identify the 6 thematic topics to develop our curriculum, including gender roles, gender-based violence, puberty, sexuality, and health, and some other things. Yeah, and most of the sessions are offered to boys only. However, there are some sessions delivered to mixed or co-ed group of boys and girls together. So on the screens, you can see a kind of the overview of this curriculum for 2 years. Yeah, and next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm not going to talk about this, but just want to share with you so you have ideas of what the curriculums look like. So next slide. Yep, next, please. Yeah. And the curriculum start to deliver to 400 boys at grade 7 from the January 2022. By end of 2022, when the most of the sessions at grade 7 completed, we conducted a midlife evaluation. And although it is still early to share with you or to make any conclusions about the programs, there are some interesting initial reflections that come from both evaluations and from our staff observation, which I would love to share with you today. There are 4 important observations that we found in this evaluation and in our conversation with the field staff. The first thing that boys really enjoys the LSEP curriculum, and especially in some topics about confidentiality, success in school, and gender and power. And there is one very interesting point. We see that white boys think some gender sessions are very difficult to understanding, to digest, but they can very quickly recognize how inequitable gender roles is distributed at home. Yeah. And they also show their changed attitudes and try to do new practice toward gender roles at home. Secondly, that parents also reported that they observe a lot of positive change that happen with their boys at home. They now more willing to take the houseworks, such as washing or taking care of young siblings. Yes, I think that the slide's gone. Whistle. So I don't see the slide. I don't know if there's something wrong with from my side.
Yeah, no, we're also not seeing it too. I think there's a technical issue. Let's just pause for a second.
Yeah,
maybe
no
Wessel's connection. Maybe Wessel's connection dropped.
Yeah, it looks like Wessel dropped off the call, so I think the slides stopped sharing. But I will contact him and see if he's coming back.
No problems. I can continue to share. Yeah, and then when we conducted internal midlife study, the study showed that within just 1 year of pilot implementation, the boys have significantly increased their gender knowledge and attitudes, and the increase is observed for the various themes like gender-based roles, gender-based violence, perception of masculinity, puberty, sexuality, and health. And the curriculum also brought some positive impact to boys. They appear to be more willing to help with more housework at home, and at school they show more support to their female friends. And another achievement that we observed initially from this implementation is that teachers and facilitators who deliver the curriculums also benefited from the programs. They reported their change in attitude toward gender. Their views on traditional gender roles significantly changed. And for the female facilitators and teachers, they feel more confident to express themselves as women, while the male facilitators have a strong motivation to reduce inequality, as well as to share all the gender knowledge they learned with the people. And the teachers also believe that this curriculum should be implemented not only in the Room to Read project side, but in other schools and in as many grades as possible. So apart from this very positive and positive initial signs of the project implementations, we also learned a lot and have some reflections. Yeah, thanks, Wesels. Yeah, here on the screen you can see some quotes from our LSEP participant. For example, grade 8 boys said that so far I used to stay alone, and I thought it is not my job as a boy to do household, such as cleaning, cooking, or looking after my young sister. Now I know that I am an important person to share those works at home or at schools. So I think this is the statement is a very, very powerful to say that through the curriculums, how boys can change their attitude and their behavior towards more equitable gender norms. Yeah, could you please? Yeah, and then again the change happening, the positive change happening with the LSAP boys also was reported by school teachers and LSAP facilitators, and they also confirmed that boys show much more like a positive and supportive and respectful with their female friends at school, and they are more willing to help their families with houseworks at home. Next slide, please. Yeah. And apart from those very positive changes we see with the programs, we also recognize that there are some lessons learned and some reflection, which is we would like to share with you and hear from your experience, so as we can improve our programs. Firstly, harmful gender norms and inequalities are deeply rooted in the society, and it takes time to make change. Within 2 years curriculum, we could not expect so much miracles happen. But I agree that the earlier that we teach boys about gender, the better for boys, and to build up their more equitable attitude and practice around gender. Secondly, the opportunity to construct gender understanding through daily experience could be an important factor to motivate boys' learning and changes. From our midlife evaluation, we recognize that boys said that they feel some gender sessions are difficult and very complicated, but for those boys who can relate those gender lessons to their daily life, they feel that it is more understandable, and they can see how they can apply the ideas into their daily life. And another interesting observations for it is that the journey towards gender transformations may involve regressions before advancements. This may be normal, we don't know, so we really need to hear from your experience, but we believe that regressions should be identified and addressed proactively. And in our evaluation, we found that sometimes the relationships between girls and boys at schools a little bit better, but in some cases it's getting worse. And when we ask boys why so, the boys explain that there is a fear of making mistakes in front of girls, or being blamed for saying something inappropriate or offensive, like a curse word or sexual language. That's why boys say that, okay, it's better not to have so much interaction with their female friends to avoid those kind of fear. And then this is something we would like to explore further. Yeah. And the last 2 points I would like to share here is that even our programs mainly focus on life skill sessions, delivering life skill session 2 point. We believe that mentorships should be an integral part of the life skill education. While the in-class life skill session can help boys improve their awareness and knowledge of gender. However, to motivate them to change their attitude and cultivate positive behaviors, it requires ongoing support and mentoring from teachers and facilitators. And in this case, facilitator and teachers should be a positive role model for boys to follow, which is, I think, that Aline stated at the very beginning of your presentation. And finally, we think that engaging with community and family is really important to help boy so that parents can observe and provide timely support to their sons in their process of gaining and internalizing the new ideas and in practicing new behaviors. When we interview with boys, some boys reveal that even they are very motivated to make change at home, they feel challenging to discuss this with their parents. This could be explained that boys feel have little power within their family because of their age to persuade adults to change the behaviors. And that's why in our program, we also provide some support to parents with some training to help them to build up their positive and gender equitable parenting techniques. This is still very early days. We haven't yet seen any impacts of this kind of interventions to the parents, but I think that we can have more findings and more insight by end of this year. Yeah, that's all for me. I hope that I provide some useful information for you, and really much looking forward some insights, some thoughts from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tui. It was very insightful. Thank you. And it's really lovely to see how Room to Read has scaled up so much into so many countries. Our last speaker, but certainly not least, is Tatiana. Tatiana will be introducing the Kinder Resource Packs. CARE is a centerpiece of the work they do. As far as I know, at least for the last 2 years, Tatiana and her colleagues have been intensively working on this program. So she'll be presenting the results of the project and then quite a lot of resources and their recent ministerial recognition. Tatiana is joining us from Coimbra, Portugal, and I'll briefly share Tatiana's background with everyone. Tatiana is a feminist, mother, and auxiliary researcher at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra, where she coordinates the Observatory on Masculinities and coordinates several national and international projects on masculinities and gender violence prevention, with a relevant impact in the production of contributions to programs and public policies on gender equality and masculinities in Portugal and in the European context. She is a member of the Permanent Commission of the Scientific Committee of SES and the Steering Committee of MenEngage Iberia. Looking forward to listening to you, Tatiana.
Thank you, Suna, for the kind presentation. Great to see old friends, old colleagues, and new ones. And it's an honor to be on this panel, honestly. Let me start by saying that I love the word revolution. So revolutionize is something that I think it fits perfectly in the work that we do. And I think Mary and the work Mary does gave us the answer. So I think we need to focus on empathy. So empathy is a new revolution. And let me start by saying that today I'm not sharing the quantitative and qualitative results of the research we did under the Kinder project, but let me just share an anecdote with you. When we asked parents what feature they thought society values the most in boys, the last one was empathy with 0.5%. So this is very serious and we need to work on promoting empathy. So let me start. I'll let you know, Vessel, when to change the slide, okay? Because let me start by just giving you 2 or 3 perspectives from our theoretical approach, a critical perspective, feminist studies on masculinities. We, of course, think we need to explore how dominant and hegemonic masculinities are being reimagined, are being renegotiated and reconstructed. And by understanding these new patterns of violence amongst boys on the one hand, and how care as the opposite of violence and a concept in construction from a feminist perspective can be adopted, are put in practice and understood. So we adopt this feminist approach to masculinities that allows us to critically challenge the hegemonic models of boyhood, especially by developing what we call a feminist theory of caring masculinity, because of course we talk a lot about masculinity studies, but we need to make it clear that it is from a feminist perspective. So through this critical understanding of the new patterns and ways in which patriarchal masculinities are perpetuated in society, and placing care and empathy as the centerpiece and proactive practice that opposes violence, sustained models of masculinities, feminist masculinity studies can challenge the dominant forms of masculinity. So I bring this because here in our studies and the studies from our colleagues in other centers in Europe and in the Global South, care is the opposite of violence and not non-violence. So non-violence is static, care is proactive. And so why kinder? In recent, kinder or kinder, the way you want to call, for the last 5, almost 6 years, we've been adapting gender transformative methodologies that were developed in the Global South, mainly in Latin America, some of them while I was there as the executive director of Equimundo in Brazil. And so we're adapting these gender transformative methodologies to the European context, and specifically, of course, in Portugal. That's the country where we're based. And we know that in recent years, education systems, they have embraced the cause of combating gender stereotypes and promoting more gender equal socialization of all children as a core strategy to achieve healthier and more balanced societies. But there is, however, and in particular in Portugal, a gap in what concerns kindergartens, preschools, and elementary schools' approaches to these issues. In the same way, Equimundo developed the Global Boyhood Initiative because program H&M, starting at the age of 12, we saw that it was too late to start to work on empathy and care and caring masculinities. So we, from the research we carried out with program H&M, with the program P and parent program, we saw that we needed a program that would start at the age of 3. And the Kinder project works and targets professionals, not children, because we applied for funding, and this is an European Commission funded project during the pandemics, more or less. So we were aware that it would be difficult to go into schools. So drawing from the Portuguese experience of the Kinder project today, I would like to discuss the decisive role of gender responsive and transformative tools that allow teachers, educators, students, so pre-service personnel and other staff to respond to the specific needs of children in teaching and learning processes from a gender equality perspective. So with the Kinder methodology, we aimed, and because we are an applied research institution, so we pilot, we test, we evaluate the methodologies, and then we just put them out in the world, and we just aim to influence public policies or to develop new public policies. We aim to contribute to a systemic change that impacts not only children, but also professionals and families and students who already influence or will influence and shape children's lives. So what is the Kinder program and methodology? It aims to target education professionals and parents, and it was piloted, as Suna mentioned, between January 21 and June 23. So today, what we'd like to do is to share some outputs of this program that was adopted in Portugal, in Spain, and in Croatia, with a partnership with the Global Boyhood Initiative and International Step-by-Step Association. So the Kinder program has, in Portugal, one Kinder Portuguese manual, of course, targeting the professionals, but also families. We developed 2 children's books they are very curious because they are about this green bug who taught Dad how to cook. That's the name of the book. So still looking into the pandemic world they lived in, targeting children aged 3 to 6 and 7 to 12. We adapted the conversation starters from the Global Boyhood Initiative. So we adapted and translated into Portuguese. And we developed an animation called Be Kinder. And this was a collective work between Portugal, Spain, and Croatia. And it's a short animation that can be shared all around the world because it has no words. So this is the Kinder manual in Portugal. It's called Deconstructing Stereotypes from Childhood. It is based on the qualitative and quantitative research we carried out before. So we included modules for teachers to reflect, namely on anti-racist education, LGBTQI plus education, and other sort of issues that weren't in our EquiX manual and programs H&M. Next one, please. We have the European manual, what we call the European manual, where all the partners reflect on the issues that result from the research in each country and the pilot. So it's called Be Kinder: Unraveling Paths to Address Gender Stereotypes in Education and Early Childhood. And if you see on the right side, you have the authors. They are from the consortium, what we call the Kinder Consortium, and everything is online on the Kinder website. Next one, Vessel, please. So what's the theory and rationale of Kinder? I already mentioned part of it. So challenging gender stereotypes and promoting a balanced socialization of girls and boys. Suna said in my short bio that I'm a mother and a feminist. But as Vessel, I honestly only became aware, and I work on masculinities for almost 20 years now. My PhD thesis was on masculinities, violence, and war. But it was only after Pedro, that some of you know, now he's 4 years old, that I understood the tough work that we have ahead of us and what we need to change. I have a girl, a 16-year-old one, but her adolescence is much easier than Pedro's childhood, honestly. So gender differentiation in Portugal continues to shape practices and the curricula, visible and hidden. So, you know, self-perceptions are still something that influence the classroom and the kindergartens. And deconstructing them is particularly challenging because most of school staff, they are not trained at all to address gender-related issues, and they are not aware of their own gender biases. And thus they keep contributing to the perpetuation of gender stereotypes. They think they don't do that, but when they go through the pilot, they understand their own biases. And this interaction with children, of course, constructs gender and reflects the social norms of the society in which they live, so impacting on the learning environment. So teachers and educators play a key role in the healthy and equitable development of children. I don't know in your countries, but in Portugal, for example, my son, he spends 7 hours a day in kindergarten. And after he comes home, he spends 3 hours with me before going to bed. So it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. So we need to deconstruct the stereotypes that might be transmitted by educators. And a side note, educators, female educators, because Pedro sees his father, my partner, sharing everything, but then he goes to kindergarten and they're all female. And so we need also to challenge the structure. So the objective was to develop an effective and innovative program and training curricula for professionals, working with children aged 3, 6, and 7, 12. And the priorities were to provide data and education materials, because this was the main gap the professionals identified when asked about the materials. They don't have materials that deconstruct gender stereotypes or promote caring masculinities, and teaching recommendations in both public and private kindergartens and primary schools. Next, please. Also, the campaigns, we know by using the gender transformative methodologies developed by Promundo, now Equimundo, and other partners, that the campaigns are an important part of the methodology to reach a broader audience. And so we implemented national campaigns on Teachers' Day, on Kinder's Day. We take advantage of every day celebrated to develop a campaign. And the short video that I hope to have time to watch in the end is what is part of that campaign. Pedagogical tools, the conversation starters on the first place, and then the two books. The Green Bug Taught Dad How to Cook, targeting 3, 6, and 7, 11, about two families in dialogue, virtual dialogues during the pandemics and the lockdowns. Next, please. So the Kinder approach and the project and all the tools are open and access to all. We have a playroom in the Kinder website, not only with our resources, but also resources that we try together from all over the world, from our partners and others. And this is my last slide. And so the training curricula was considered by the Ministry of Education a good practice and is now on the website of the Ministry of Education, as well as all the pedagogical tools we developed. And I would like, please, to end with the 2 minutes, the last part of the animation video. Is that okay, Suna? Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We cut, we are not seeing. It is a 5-minute video, more or less. So we're just watching the last part after a day of school. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's amazing. That really lifted us at the end. And I'm tempted to now watch more about it and keen on showing it to my kid. So thank you so much to all our panelists. We're actually doing very, very good on time. Just before we start the Q&A, I'm just going to borrow a few of your phrases. It might sort of summarize all of our work. Nonviolence is static, but care is proactive. And we're trying to deconstruct stereotypes from childhood. It was a good summary reminder at the end. So how should we, I see one question already posed at the Q&A function. I can start there. And then I think in the chat, I saw something. Actually, let me first say that so that everyone can hopefully benefit from it. Ryan asked everyone, is there a website for the Room to Read. So people are interested in learning and reading more about TUI, Room to Read's work. And then the question was asked to Sebastian, asked a question on what kind of books would you recommend for fathers and parents seeking to incorporate an empathic home environment? And Mary suggested that we read Roots of Empathy. Everyone can learn by reading the book Roots of Empathy, Changing the World Child by Child. And it is on the Roots of Empathy website. I thought those were very helpful tips everyone can benefit from. Now, Jonathan Reed has shared kindly a very good question here. Something that I've been focusing on in my work with the next generation men in Canada is a lack of understanding about boys' care towards each other. Obviously, educators and facilitators can have significant impact, but how can we intentionally nurture empathy within natural peer relationships within boys' lives? How about we start with Mary, and then we can hear other panelists if they'd like to respond to that question too.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for the question. The easiest place to access boys these days, as we heard from Tatiana, her 4-year-old spends 7 hours in school and 3 hours with her. So I think school is the go-to place to have the biggest impact on prevention, on intervention, on any of the things that we hope to nurture or to teach. And I think what that means is we have to work with teachers, and I believe we have to work with teachers in pre-service so that teachers have insights in how to nurture empathy in all of the children. We socialize our little girls differently. It's more natural for them to adopt an ethic of care. Their play is reflective of caregiving. They dress baby dolls, they wash baby dolls, they feed baby dolls. And little boys have, I think, exactly the same potential for caring about one another, but not as much experience and not the same degree of language and not the same emotional fluency as little girls. And I think, I mean, yes, Roots of Empathy is one way, but you're not going to wallpaper the world with Roots of Empathy. But if teachers had the insights to understand that boys care about one another in the way that girls do, but they don't have the same social skills, and by helping them develop the ability to be a friend and to know how to keep a friend, it requires empathy. And empathy is caught, not taught. So if the teachers behave empathically to all of the children, all boats rise.
Thank you. Empathy is caught, not taught. That's also going to stay in my mind for a while. Would anyone else like to respond to that question? Okay. Another question Scott Osborne has asked, does anyone have materials or programs designed for staff to offer parents? Many of us find parent-guardian attitudes are challenging.
I can. In our research, parental attitude was the main challenge for education professionals when promoting empathy and caring attitudes. So that's why we have in our website the Playroom, and we developed these pedagogical tools. We don't use the word gender, we don't use the word masculinities, so we know how to deal with challenging environments, because that's something that we unfortunately learned in Brazil some years ago. So we developed the animation and the children's books that can go home and make parents reflect about specific situations. Or to call, it also works here to call parents to school and invite someone to talk about specific issues without using some words that usually scare some sectors of society. So I would say that Program P, Vessel, Program P and MenCare have resources. The parent program has resources. I think the Kinder program has some resources, and of course, all the other projects here. Vessel?
I think, no, thank you, Tatiana. Just to say that the requests for resources and research links, after we've completed the webinar, when we post it on the MenCare website, we will post the links to all of the partners pages, but also as panelists and as we spoke through the webinar, any resources that anybody has mentioned, we'll add in the. I'm so used to listening to podcasts, so I'm about to say we'll add in the show notes. But so we will add on the page on the MenCare website. And I can see Mary's got a hand up.
I kind of feel like it's a bit of tease what I'm going to share, because I very much believe in the power of parents. And as an old school mom, I also believe in the power of teachers, but I believe in the magic of children. And we have a program for the little children, the 3 to 5-year-old children. It's called Seeds of Empathy. And in that program, and in Roots of Empathy, for the children who receive the program, we offer a parenting program. And it's called Nurturing Empathy in Children. And it's related to what is happening in the program that the children are receiving. And it's particularly focused on temperament traits. And we look at the 9 temperament traits and help parents understand their child through the lens of where they land on the continuum of the traits, say, of intensity. And also the parents then can understand where they are on the temperament trait of intensity to see if you've got something volatile going here. And it's just about self-understanding. And I'm sorry that none of our materials are open source, because they're all trained and it's all very experiential. But I think how beautiful that all the resources we're hearing about are available for people. So I'm going to be studying all of your resources for sure.
Thank you, Tatiana. The next question asks, what about materials or programs designed for, how about training, working with children in settings where children are not always going to a preschool, early childhood education center? I'm assuming the question is for those children who are living in economically disadvantaged contexts, in wars, conflict zones. This is very much related to my work. There are still hundreds of millions of children who have no access to early childhood development services. So that's a really good question. How can we work with such children?
I mean, in Brazil, in some favelas, that was the case. So children would go to school, to mandatory school at the age of 5. And so before that, there were no kindergartens. And in those cases, what we did, we specifically focused on the work with parents. Because sometimes you have these, I don't know how to say it in English, but parental kindergartens, you know, where children go from one house to the other. And so it's not a formal kindergarten, but families do share the caregiving and taking care of children. So I'm reading the messages. I'm feeling really, really happy about this. So basically, one of the answers would be focusing on fathers and parents in general, and trying to train them, because basically the family is the basis. I'm seeing that Program P is being piloted in Guatemala, in rural Guatemala, and it is, yeah.
Yes, and it seems like it's been getting a lot of good traction there from the men and the...
And Suna, sorry for interrupting you. I have here one, I think it was Vessel from Matt any data on intergenerational transfer of care. We have that with the images of urban violence in Brazil and Mozambique. So the same way we have the intergenerational transmission of violence, we have questions on care. But I think we need to have new data on that. And we will have in 2 years for the next State of the World Fund.
That's great. Since we have about 5-6 minutes left, Wessel, there are 2 more questions I'll be taking. Matt Strain says, I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad. Is there any data on how having a male primary caregiver changes children's view of gender roles?
Yeah, that was the question that I just passed to Tatiana Suna about
Sorry.
the intergenerational transfer.
Okay.
So I'm just, as we're talking, I'm looking for the images link and I'll post it in the chat. Just to look at, so we can also look at the images data, because there were questions asked to respondents of their experience of being parented, and how that has affected their own gendered attitudes. So I'll post that in the chat.
Okay.
And I see Gabriela, I believe she's from Brazil or Portugal. Oi, Gabriela. The link, you're asking 2 different things. So we have the cartoon video. The title is Be Kinder. And the Bicho Verde is the book. So, and everything is on the website I shared, the Kinder website. Thank you.
And do you want to briefly maybe tell about Program P and Kinder, Tatiana?
This is a mess. This is a mess because this is something that I wanted to mention in the beginning. So usually, and Mary has lots of experience. And usually these sort of approaches and the feminist movement and methodologies, they were developed in what we call the Global North. And we know the main offices are based in London, in cities like that. And they have projects in the Global South. What I think makes Equimundo's and MenCare's methodologies and approaches so interesting is that they were developed in the Global South, in South Africa and Latin America. And then they were adapted to, for example, Europe and the US. And it makes a lot of sense because the US and Europe, we are arrogant and we think we don't need this kind of approaches. And we really do need these approaches. So I think that's why adapting these methodologies, Program P in Europe, we call it Parent. It was the program Parent. The Global Boyhood Initiative targeting boys was developed at the same time we were presenting a proposal to the European Commission to work with education professionals starting at the age of 3. So Kinder, that's the new approach. And now we have a new program called Engaging Men in Nurturing Care. It's funded by the Oak Foundation. It's a 3-year program in Portugal, Spain, and Italy, also with the International Step-by-Step Association as the leading institution. And it merges Kinder and Parent. You know, so the Oak Foundation, they were so happy about the results that now what we need to do is to put in touch the education sector and the health sector because they don't dialogue. So how can we develop a gender transformative methodology focusing in those 2 sectors? So this is the new one for the next series of webinars.
I think there are some connections being done. Yes, on the chat function. That's excellent.
The director. Hi, Clara.
I think we're coming towards the end of our time. So I'll just say a few things before we close. I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists taking their time out of their busy schedules and joining us today, and offer us these really important insights and lessons learned on how we're going to be teaching our boys to care. So, of course, I'd like to also thank our audience for joining us for what has been an enlightening conversation. Thank you for all the questions and the comments and the reflections. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the organizers of this great webinar series. And we're already looking forward to the next one. The next one will focus on invest in care, measure it, disaggregated by gender, social class, and age. So measurement is going to be a huge topic. It's already being discussed in all of our work. So we look forward to the next one and hope you'll be with us in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Hi Piotr.